You may have seen the video posted last week about the Mount Hope, West Virginia Police Department officer Aaron Shrewsbury. Well, since the video was posted, I've received a lot of information from the public, including from other police officers. And that's always an indication, in my experience and opinion, that there's a real problem there. I was told today by credible sources that Officer Shrewsbury has now been suspended with pay. I haven't received verification of this as of yet, however. In the video about what happened to Mr. Beckett, I mentioned that there was this kid from Ohio who had had his own encounter with Officer Shrewsbury last year. Let me tell you more. On August 15th of 2021, several police agencies responded to a 911 call from Ace Adventures Complex, a vacation and whitewater rafting facility located in Minden, Fayette County, West Virginia. There was a verbal altercation that took place at the complex. 20-year-old Nathan Nelson from Ohio had been visiting his sister who worked at Ace Adventures Complex. At some point, they became involved in some sort of altercation or argument involving multiple other individuals. Several police agencies arrived, including Officer Shrewsbury from the Mount Hope Police Department. Marijuana was found in the car belonging to Nathan and his sister. Officer Shrewsbury arrested Nathan and placed him in handcuffs. According to Shrewsbury's subsequent police report, he handcuffed Nathan and escorted him to a police cruiser, which was not his own. While standing beside the cruiser, Nathan allegedly became angry and asked, quote, why he was effing being arrested. Shrewsbury then asked him to stop swearing and then advised him that he was being arrested for disorderly conduct and possession of a controlled substance. And this is all from Shrewsbury's report. Nathan responded, this was effing bull you know what, to which Shrewsbury responded, yeah it is, in that, quote, I wasn't knowledgeable about how things were done in Ohio where you were from, but in West Virginia, possessing marijuana and other illegal and dangerous drugs, using profanity in public and fighting in the streets definitely are all illegal here, according to his report. Shrewsbury then wrote in his report further that, quote, I turned away from the male subject briefly to get an Oak Hill officer's attention to unlock the police vehicle, so I could place the male subject safely inside of it. But that, quote, as I turned back to the male subject, he turned his head toward me and pursed his lips while making a noise as if he were clearing his throat of phlegm and filling his mouth with it and sputum. He then moved his head towards me in a motion that made me believe that he was going to spit on me. Observing this, I then rapidly used a straight arm with an open palm to divert the male subject's head away from me, making physical contact with the left side of his head and facial area. The maneuver was abrupt, but did not cause him to fall to the ground. Sounds exciting, right? Sounds complicated. Sounds really complicated. In reality, what he's describing is he punched a guy who was handcuffed. So afterward, Shrewsbury then placed Nathan, still handcuffed. This is after the supposed open palm diversion movement was made. He places Nathan in somebody else's police cruiser, still handcuffed. Now, after inflicting injury on him. So the vehicle was supposedly locked, but somehow he placed him in it. Ultimately that night, Nathan was only charged with misdemeanor possession of marijuana. And Nathan maintains that he wasn't resisting Shrewsbury in any way. And contrary to what Shrewsbury wrote in his police report, Nathan maintains that it went down a little bit differently. He says that he was told by Shrewsbury, quote, if you don't shut up, I'm going to take these handcuffs off and do one of those old West Virginia ass whoopings. And we know that Officer Shrewsbury has a mouth on him, don't we? After apparently not liking Nathan's response, Nathan states that Officer Shrewsbury, who started to walk away after saying the ass-whooping thing, quickly turned around, punched him in the face with a closed fist right hook, with Nathan still handcuffed, not physically resisting in any way. So I discussed in the previous video about Officer Shrewsbury that he had been decertified as a police officer while working at the Fayette County Sheriff's Office back in 2015 for lying and dishonesty as a police officer. The next year, Shrewsbury ran for the position of the elected magistrate, which is a judge in Fayette County. touting his law enforcement experience during the campaign, not mentioning, based on what I've seen, the fact that he was decertified as a police officer the year before. And also bragging during that campaign that he was a professional boxer. And a review of old social media also reveals that at least one past boxing photo being posted by Officer Shrewsbury. Now, the physical trauma inflicted to Nathan corroborates that, and corroborates Nathan's recollection of being punched with a closed fist right hook, rather than the word salad that was written or submitted by Officer Shrewsbury in his subsequent police report. Now, Nathan, in the back of someone else's police cruiser, is discovered by other police officers sitting there in the back of their cruiser with blood, handcuffed, with his tooth laying in his lap, his shirt covered with blood, suffering in severe pain. These other two police officers took Nathan into their custody. Well, he was actually already in their car, and they transported him to the emergency room of a nearby hospital, where he ended up undergoing emergency treatment. Nathan's jaw was broken in 2 different places. He was going to need immediate surgery. He ended up being transported all the way back to Ohio in an ambulance to a specialist surgeon at Ohio State University for the necessary subsequent surgery on his jaw. So you have a 20-year-old kid, handcuffed, charged only with misdemeanor possession of marijuana, punched in the face by a police officer claiming to have experience as a professional boxer, knocking out at least one tooth, fracturing his jaw in 2 places, requiring transport by ambulance all the way to Ohio for surgery, where he spent 4 days hospitalized, and I believe had to have his jaw wired shut during the surgery. Extremely painful. One of the police officers from the nearby Oak Hill Police Department who discovered Nathan injured and bleeding in the back of the police cruiser and who transported him to the emergency room of the nearby hospital noted in her report that she didn't even know who had arrested and handcuffed Nathan. She went so far in her report to identify what the handcuffs looked like, as if it was going to be an evidence of a crime, that they were going to need to identify who in the world had taken this guy into custody and injured him so badly. Another Oak Hill Police Department officer noted in his report that he was, quote, made aware that an officer had punched the male arrestee and placed him into an Oak Hill officer's car, basically abandoning poor Nathan there with no information or documentation of why he was there or what happened to him. Laughably, in his subsequent written police report, Officer Shrewsbury filled out a use of force report that contained almost no information about the force that he used or the reason for using it. Mind you, I don't believe his report even alleged that Nathan spit at him or spit on him, just that he allegedly heard sounds, very articulately phrased, very poetic, about this. I can see the slow motion, preparation to spit being described by Officer Shrewsbury. But it was never alleged in his report that he ever physically resisted, that he ever spit on him. He wasn't charged with that. Believe me, you spit on a police officer, you get charged for it. You better believe it. So instead, we have a police use of force on somebody who's just handcuffed, charged with possession of marijuana. So police use of force incidents, as I've discussed many times before, are judged by the federal courts using what are called the Graham factors, which are going to easily show that this was an unreasonable and excessive use of force and therefore a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now, sometimes an arrestee can be judged under the 14th Amendment, but that's for another video. We don't need to get into that just now. But here you have an individual charged with an extremely minor crime who is handcuffed, who is not physically resisting, but rather only likely running his mouth, expressing criticism, who's punched in the face with tremendous force by a large police officer who claims to be a boxer. While that police officer claims that he heard pre-spit sounds, that same police officer has already been decertified for lying as a police officer. Thus, it's probably for the best if Officer Shrewsbury is suspended right now. And all of this begs the question about why the town of Mount Hope ever hired him as a police officer in the first place, and why they appear to have let him really escape real supervision. There's a lot more. Make sure that you subscribe to hear what's happening next, because we're learning more by the day, and lawsuits are looming.